with the issue of council housing, on which I have a lot of calls coming up. I can see in many.
If people have to leave their homes, if you have to provide somewhere else for them to go, so you don't gain anything at all, what are you going to do with them? Leave them on the street and...
Be gained by anyone, and how much would I suffer if my secure tenancy were to be revoked? And then she adds, please do not give out my name on air, as sadly there's still a stereotypical assumption of what a council tenant is, and thus a stigma to living in a council property.
We are in the middle of a growing housing crisis, caused by both a housing shortage and inequality in the way housing is shared out. Building rates of affordable homes have been in steep decline over the last 30 years. Meanwhile, 80% of social housing that is sold off is not replaced. Social housing waiting lists are now more than double what they were in the 90s, over 2 million. Housing is no longer being built or maintained for the needs of society. The cost of private renting has risen 37% in the last 5 years and is set to rise a further 35% over 6 years from 2012. British rent is the highest in Europe. 1 in 5 people in Britain now receives a cash allowance to help with rental costs, and millions are driven into poverty because of their housing costs. Meanwhile, property developers around the country have been profiting and landlords have been buying up stock and pushing up prices. Whilst affordable housing is in more demand than ever, luxury builds are what are being proposed across London's boroughs to cater for affluent investors. For social housing estates across London, this has meant attempts at eviction, a social cleansing of the capital, and displacement of residents to towns and cities across the country at the council's will.
One of the terrible things that's happened in Britain is that housing has changed from being a utility or a service, which it was in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, something that everybody needed and you tried to work out to provide it, to becoming something you could speculate on, something you could profit from, something, for instance, that you could invest in and it would pay your pension. But only 2% of people are landlords. So this can only pay the pensions of 2% of people. And for each of those people to get a fairly good pension will require dozens and dozens of tenants to suffer paying more rent than they can reasonably afford to allow somebody else to enjoy riches in their retirement.
The West Hendon Estate in Barnet, London, was home to over 600 social housing units. Regeneration plans have been surfacing since 2002, with promises that local residents would benefit from improvements to properties. However, many promises have fallen away, and plans approved by Barnet Council and Metropolitan Housing Trust now entail a £520 million build of 2,000 luxury apartments. The average price of a 2-bed property starts at £415,000. Meanwhile, social housing allocations have fallen from 40 to 25%. Many tenants have been forced off the estate into temporary housing or the private sector. Tenants feel they will not be able to stay on the estate or in the local area where many have lived all their lives because they will not be able to afford the maintenance costs or rent prices of the new luxury apartments built in the place of their homes.
You've got families on here. You've got parents whose family that they've brought up is living on this estate.
You're coming in.
Their children is living on this estate. Can you just to think what it's doing to that family, or even the mother, who's a few older than myself?
These were built for homes, so people bought or they rented these as their homes. What's being built now is to make money, so they're investments. Instead of using cash boxes or the bank, you're using the buildings and you're using public land to invest. These are reservations, these are money reservations, these are tax havens. The tax that's been lost to the public is in millions.
They're not thinking of the people that's paid all that rent all these years and doing nothing for them now. What? Why should we sit back and take it anymore?
I've lived here for 34 years and I don't like what I see going on. That our homes have basically got to be knocked down to make a profit. This is a council estate and they promised us like for like. As far as I'm concerned, they're going back on their word. Local people need housing, affordable housing.
Even the housing trust, which was set up to basically start taking over from the council responsibility, are also misusing their powers, and is in the same way as that they're now evicting their tenants in order so that they can sell their properties on for more profit.
The main reason we don't have enough housing is because we're leaving so much of it empty, and in particular rooms in houses empty. But not rooms in state housing, not rooms where the bedroom tax is being applied. It's rooms in owner-occupied housing and on housing that people have got mortgages on. Because our housing systems encourage people who are single or there's just a couple without children to buy or rent flats that used to be designed for families. So there's an enormous amount, millions upon millions, of bedrooms which aren't slept in every night because people are now allocating housing far more on a speculative basis on how much profit they can make or how far can they live away from other people, and not trying to satisfy their need. How much housing do you actually need?
This is the issue. It's not just affecting the people on this estate, although it affects directly the people on this estate, which is about, I think there's probably about 500 odd left that's affected. You've still got the other parts, which is Skylark and that, which are also being affected, but they keep classifying it, yes, it's part of the estate project, but it's no longer part of the estate.
We're from the New Era Estate. We come down to support you. From our situation, it's just a case of not giving up. You know, you've got to have a voice. You're doing it really well, and you've got to be relentless with it. I mean, that was one thing that we maintained through our campaign. We weren't going to go. They were going to have to drag us out.
And you
of our
have
rows.
to stick together.
Absolutely.
Because if they start to conquer and divide you, that's it.
That's
the
it.
whole campaign will
And they will
fall.
We've talked for about a decade about precarious jobs and precarious employment and what that does for people's self-esteem and anxiety and depression and so on. Precarious housing is even worse. Precarious housing is the idea that you might not necessarily have somewhere to go back to in a night. You can be evicted. If you can't manage to keep up payments, you could lose your home. It has its worst effects on children. Children who are precariously housed. A quarter of all children in Britain are now in private rented housing. They can be moved on with just 2 months' notice. They can't keep their friends. They can't stay in the same school. They have to move again and again and again if somebody wants to make a greater profit out of their parents.
You can't have council housing because you can't afford the rent. So basically that's saying, if you need council housing in Barnet, go somewhere else.
About a quarter of MPs are landlords. So, you know, MPs know more about landlords than most people know. This particular government, this is a coalition government, tends to look after the interests of very rich people. It's made up of incredibly rich people. If you look at the wealth of members of cabinet, they are disproportionately from the best off 1% of society, the same group that successful landlords are from. And so they have a mindset which says if you let a few very rich people manage things, it'll be well managed. Just trust us and we'll look after the little people.
Well, what have we got here?
It doesn't affect councillors. If it had affected councillors, 63 councillors would have been here today, plus 3 MPs, because that is the amount of political people appointed in Barnet. And Tom Davey, one of the councillors, says the type of people who he wants to live in this borough, we do not fit his criteria. He's already made that clear. So maybe they should just sack all councillors and sack all MPs.
Coalition policies have focused on housing, but their objective is to keep house prices up and maintain growth. This is deepening the crisis. Schemes such as Help to Buy see a huge commitment of public money. Buyers are able to take on expensive properties that would not otherwise be available. If house prices fall, we've collectively insured banks and building societies. Building affordable homes or controlling prices could see the market crash. Instead, a growing insecure housing market that is fragile, risky, and working against social need is being propped up by the government and preserved with public money.
I'm a non-secure tenant on the West Hendon Estate, or was. They served us with repossession orders and told us, we don't have to go to court, that's just a formality. But in actual fact, if we didn't turn up in court, they start repossession orders against you to take your flat back.
Housing officer had decided that he wanted to do the housing assessment at the same time as what that tenant was supposed to be at court, and told the tenant, no need to worry about going there, we'll just get this done. If the tenant would have bowed down to him, that tenant would be facing eviction right now. When people phoned up Barnet Council, they was advised on the phone, no need to attend court because it's just one of those things we have to go through. It's just a standard process that we have to go through. There's no need to worry about it. We won't evict you from your home. Quite a few of them have gone.
We will not see and we will not accept any kind of Kosovo-style, social cleansing of London. You are not going to see, on my watch, you are not going to see thousands of families being evicted from the place where they've been living and where they have put down roots.
Pushing out the ordinary working class people that have lived in London all their life. Yep. That's it. Yep. And that is social cleansing. Yep. Why should we be able to, why should we be shipped off to Manchester or Birmingham or Hastings to push it out and push us out and push us out, so the rich come in and it's only the rich can stay? We already know if we move out of London we ain't never getting back in. Thank you. Why should we be moved? Why should we move away from our families?
This is definitely social cleansing, without doubt. And it's happening all over London, and they've now decided there's another 29 areas outside of London which they are now targeting for the same process.
When the word social cleansing was first used in London, Boris Johnson actually talked against it and said he didn't want to see it. And this was partly because some of the first landlords who identified it noticed that all the tenants who were unable to pay the rent were not white. So the kind of cleansing that's going, it's a horrible word, but the moving of the poor out of London is disproportionately, massively moving people who are not white out of London. And that is what happens if you go for a policy that says if you can't afford, you can't be there. Our cities are now much more divided than they were in the past. People in rich areas are richer, people in poor areas are poorer. There's much less mixing within these areas than there used to be. And this creates fear. People are afraid of each other. They're afraid of different people in different areas because they mix less. And that fear accelerates house price growth because you end up paying as much as you possibly can not to have to rent near poor people or buy near poor people.
Ask a bird, ask a fox, ask a bee, ask a bear, ask anything that is any creature end up having a home. They fight for homes. It's a must for somebody to have a home, to live, to go home. And you have to have affordable homes where you can afford to eat, keep warm, clothed, and a roof over your head. If you can't do that, the guy in the black limousine is going to take you and give you a drive up the road.